In the waning hours of World War II, the Allies faced a new terror in the skies. It had twin engines, twin machine guns, and flew like nothing they had ever seen before. It was capable of flying faster than traditional planes, impossible to detect on radar, and would prove to be a radical departure from modern aircraft design. And had it been rolled out, could have changed the outcome of the war, the way we design planes today, and even lead to something far more sinister. This is the original flying wing, the Horten 229. This is an aircraft with no tail and that has no defined fuselage, essentially a wing as the entire aircraft. Initially designed by brothers Reimar and Walter Horten, HO 229 was a sleek number, measuring 7.4 meters in length at its center line with a total wingspan of 16.8 meters. The Horten wing concept addressed the whole engine stall dilemma that afflicts flying wing aircraft by ensuring that the aircraft would keep stable at all times. It achieved this by having a bell-shaped wing that was long and thin, or what is known as a high aspect ratio wing. This design principle meant that the weight of the aircraft would be spread over a greater surface area during a stall or engine cutoff, thus creating greater drag and allowing the aircraft to slow down and be controlled. By the way, several decades later, Reimar Horten's bell-shaped wing would be called nothing short of genius by Al Boers, a NASA chief scientist at the Neil A. Armstrong Flight Research Center in California. The Horten HO's cockpit height was decidedly low at 1.1 meters, although its overall height was 2.81 meters at its apex. Unsurprisingly, this made the space incredibly cramped that it only allowed for one crew member, and even that would be tight for that person with their head likely bumping on the top of the canopy. The HO 229's range was highly impressive, 1,900 kilometers. It also had a flying ceiling of 15,000 meters or 49,000 feet, which was useful in terms of stealth. The Germans didn't really know it at the time, but the British were using a rudimentary radar during the Battle of Britain, and this aircraft would have been highly decisive in those skirmishes across the English Channel. There was also that other speed requirement. The speed capabilities of the Horten HO 229 were a little bit less impressive. The Flying Wings power plant consisted of two Junkers Jumo 004B turbojet engines with 8.83 kilonewtons of thrust each. And whilst all that jargon does actually sound particularly impressive for World War II, it didn't actually meet that requirement that we mentioned earlier of 1,000 kilometers per hour. Even so, it was said to possess a never-exceed speed of just 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles per hour, which the conspiracy part of me thinks that the designers put it in there to make the head of the Luftwaffe happy. But then again, perhaps they were impressed by the takeoff speed of 150 kilometers or 93 miles per hour and a climb rate of 22 meters a second or 4,300 feet per minute, which was incredible for the day. In terms of armaments, the HO 229 was hardly packing, being only able to carry two 30mm machine gun cannons. Nevertheless, the Nazis believed that an entire squadron of them would have been sufficient in what have been their main role, which was to hunt down and shoot the fleets of Allied bombers that were attacking Germany's industrial plants, main infrastructure, and largest cities. By 1945, Germany was being crippled by Allied bombardments, and it was thought that the Horten HO 229 could stop that. And once the industrial capacity of the country was saved, why stop there? Could the HO 229 technology be scaled up in such a way to take the fight back to England, become the new air superiority fighter, or perhaps even take the fight to the United States itself? Alas, reality made all of these ambitious plans come crashing down. The prototype suffered many technical problems. The only jet-powered example had a successful flight in February of 1945, but crashed in another test a few weeks later due to engine failure, which killed its test pilot. And then there was also the timing. All of the frantic testing was being done in the last few months of World War II, with the Allied forces coming from both the East and West. As with so many examples of cutting-edge revolutionary aviation designs by the Horten Ho 229 was a case of too little, too late. But all was not lost. The Hortens had left the aviation world quite the legacy. The flying wing concept conceived by the Horten brothers no doubt inspired post-war designers in the US. One such aviation designer was Jack Northrop, who had been inspired by the Horten sports gliders of the 1930s, not to mention the Ho 229 captured by Patton and all of his men at the end of World War II. The American designer had been hard at work at the XB-35 flying wing bomber design in the 1940s. It proved that the Hortens had been right to use jet engines instead for the Ho 229, and perhaps that bell-shaped flying wing would have solved many of the other stability issues of the XB-35. It was indeed Northrop's company that would later develop the highly successful B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. There is no doubt that Northrop's stealth bomber designs was inspired by the Horten Ho 229, given how many resemblances are there. Interestingly, the flying wing concept wasn't even entirely that of the Horten brothers. That credit belongs to a German aerospace engineer, Hugo Junkers, that had already patented a flying wing design back in 1910. Experts believe that the groundbreaking work of the Horten brothers was done much to pave the way for the superior efficiency of aircraft in the near future, with the possibility of improved drag efficiencies of at least 70%, which is a huge deal in the world of aviation. The Horten design also does much to even explain the flight of birds, who, after all, don't need entails in order to fly majestically. But you might be wondering if anything was salvage of the bold project that came to a sudden halt in the middle of 1945. Today, the only surviving Ho 229 airframe, which was the third version of the aircraft, or the Ho 229 V3, is housed at the Paul E. Garber Restoration Facility at the Smithsonian Museum in Sutton, Maryland. It is also the only surviving World War II-era German jet prototype still in existence. It seems that the Ho 229 represented a fork in the road in plans for world domination. While the program itself might have been too little too late, had it gone on to become hugely successful, it would have paved the way for insanely ambitious plans to create a huge juggernaut with eventual plans to bomb New York.